everybody, and welcome back to another episode. My name is Dana Mantilia. I will be your host, and today our guest is Doug Landahl. Hello, Doug. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing very well. Thank you, Dana.
Good, good, good. Glad to have you here. And why don't you take a minute, tell us a little bit about you, a little bit about yourself, your company, whatever it is that you do in the CMMC world.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name again is Doug Landahl. I've been doing information security, and now we call it cybersecurity, for 34 years now. Started off with the NSA doing Orange Book evaluations. I've done HIPAA assessments, NIST assessments, GLBA, NYDFS, you name it. If a regulation comes out, us professionals in the assessment space, we've seen it. The controls are the same. The requirements are worded a little bit differently. Started 2 or 3 companies, sold most of them, but the one I'm working in now is my own, Lantigo. And I do consulting, which is risk assessments, gap assessments, policy development, and CISSP training.
All right, perfect. So you're well versed in this. That's good.
I hope so.
So today we're going to talk about preparing for the assessment, the CMMC assessment, the big day. So our first question is going to be, so who needs to know about CMMC, meaning which companies, and whom within the company needs to know about this?
Yeah, we all do. I mean, if you're doing business with the federal government or your partners are doing business with the federal government, in most all cases, that includes sensitive data. The data can be about infrastructure, like roads and bridges. It could be contracting, PII, tax information, technical data. It's the government's call whether or not it is sensitive. Now, technically, we call it federal contract information, FCI. That's the big umbrella. Inside of FCI, we do have more sensitive data called controlled unclassified information, or CUI. But that doesn't really matter that much. Either you have this sensitive data or you don't, and it's up to the government to tell you you do. If you do have it, you have to be a proper steward of it, meaning that you have to have minimum controls.
Okay. Well, that makes sense then. So now here's something people say, well, I haven't done anything yet to prepare for CMMC. So now this is kind of a scary question in and of itself, because they have to be doing something, right? Because they're already supposed to be doing something, that even if they're self-assessing them, that they are doing it. So this makes me a little nervous. So let's talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, I think basically if someone says that question, you're right. We can tone it down a bit. It's really that they haven't invested too much in CMMC yet, maybe because they think, it's not completely baked, which is true, or they haven't missed any contracting opportunities yet, which may be true as well, but it's coming, and nothing's really going to stop it. Over and above that, you've already had to do all the requirements anyway. Yeah, yes, it's CMMC and that's new, but we've had NIST 800-171 for a decade. And when you talk about the requirements, what you as a company who has this sensitive information needs to do, the requirements are nearly unchanged. So hopefully you've been doing something. However, it's the federal government who pretty much believes you haven't. They have allowed so many people to do self-assessments, everyone to do self-assessments, and they just don't believe it anymore. And that's really all the CMMC is no longer can you do a self-assessment, but the good news is it's the same controls, right? All the same stuff. So what should you do to prepare? Number one, educate your organization. Now, who in your organization needs to know about CMMC? It usually comes out of the sales team or your federal sales team, because you may be missing out on opportunities, or you're getting pressure from your partners to be CMMC compliant. It could be your leadership, it could be your technical director, but I typically see it coming out of sales. So get all of those people together that I've just mentioned and educate them. What is CMMC? What is FCI, CUI? All of these acronyms should become second nature, and you should understand where do they come from and what are the controls and what's the process we go through. Secondly, scope your system. So are we talking about every computer and connection in your organization, or is there a department in your organization that is the only one that is processing this sensitive information? Where's it connected? Where's it go? On the cloud, external hard drives, stored in paper in a filing system. All of these things matter. So scope out. I call it a network diagram and a data flow, but also a physical data flow if that's appropriate. And then lastly, do a readiness assessment, which means you understand what the requirements are for CMMC. You walk through your controls and the evidence that you have available for them, and you score yourself. Now, you probably have already been doing this with the SPRS score, but let's do a more formal one for a CMMC. And Dana, the one thing I would add there, in the same light that 800 171 or the previous assessment process allowed self-assessments, and the federal government has determined those are no good. We're not good at evaluating ourselves, right? And that's just been a human nature thing for a very long time. In fact, we're quite awful at it. Don't do a readiness assessment by yourself. Hire someone from the outside to take a look at it. They will be a lot more accurate. And accuracy is what you need here, because that's going to set you up for understanding the cost and the work that you have in front of you.
So one thing I think is going to be very interesting is because, maybe self-assess or maybe just not doing anything at all, but, we won't really say that everybody's in that boat. But with their current MSP or MSSP, this is going to be very interesting to see if people are going to need to switch to a new, MSP or MSSP that's very familiar with CMMC, or they're going to just try to wing it with who they have because they've been doing, quote unquote, they've been doing NIST 800 171 self-assessment. So that's going to be an interesting conversation for people to have with their MSP. They're going to need to have that conversation. So do you have any recommendations about what they should be asking, or, making sure this team of people can help them?
Absolutely. So yeah, so the whole topic is, outsourcing some of the controls. Someone is maybe patching your systems for you, or it's an outsourced data center. Could even be outsourced HR that does your employment screening. All of these are cloud service providers or external service providers. They're still working on what they call these things. But at the end of the day, one, you have to understand the shared responsibility, what they do and what you do. And just a hint there, you never outsource everything. There is always a piece. You can outsource someone to review your logs and figure out when an incident is, but when an incident happens, they're going to call you. You are part of the incident response team, no matter how much you try to outsource it, just as one example. Your question was about, what do you do? Should you pick people who have already gone through the process, or should you, work with someone that you've worked with before to get them through? That's a business decision. The easiest thing, if you just need a place to drop your files or spin up an operating system in the cloud, it is easiest to pick someone who's already gone through the certification. That's very simple. If there's a business reason that you want to bring someone else along, consider the risk there, because they might not come along. They might figure out this is too costly of a process, and you know what? We're out. So I think it's a fairly big risk to go with someone who is unfamiliar with CMMC and hasn't done much yet. However, there could be a business reason for it, but I think it's risky.
Yeah. Well, this ties into our next question. So how do you know if you're ready for an assessment? So, we don't want the blind leading the blind. So we want to make sure, how do you know? Okay, yeah, we're going to pass.
Yeah. So if you score yourself, you don't know. We tend to, read our one-page sheet of paper for this is what we're going to do in an incident, and say that's incident response procedures, that fits it, and it doesn't. So please, no self-assessments and then relying on them on how well ready you are. You will be very surprised when an auditor or assessor comes aboard. So yeah, get an outside assessment. How do you know? It will be their report. They will tell you what you meet, what you don't meet. You will have an SPRS score. You will have some key documents. Key documents you would have network diagram, data flow diagram, SSSP, System Security Plan, Plan of Actions and Milestones, and lots of other documents and evidence. Basically, almost most of the requirements out there, you're going to have evidence, screenshot of configuration, or you're going to have a document like an acceptable use policy or a patch management policy.
For over 20 years, Daymark Solutions has been providing best-in-class infrastructure and data protection solutions. An exciting new area of expertise is working with the defense industrial base to navigate and simplify the complexity of CMMC. Daymark is on an exclusive list of organizations approved to provide and implement Microsoft Commercial Cloud and Government Cloud solutions. The best part about Daymark is what their clients have to say about them. 5-star Google reviews and A+ testimonials. So many satisfied clients have chosen Daymark, and you should too.
Okay, all right. So now we just started talking a little bit about this. So, but to what extent does outsourcing relieve me of CMMC requirements? And I think people really need to pay attention to this, because we all want to be like, whew, all right, we're just going to check the box and we're going to outsource it. But there's so much of a human application with CMMC that I think people need to take into consideration. But I'm going to let you answer that question.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of that, there is a document that your provider should have called a shared responsibility matrix. If they do not have that, run away. This is not the right provider for you, because they don't understand that you need to be compliant with certain regulations, whether it's CMMC or HIPAA or PCI. A good outsourced provider will have one of these. In that, they will show, here's what we will do. For example, many of the organizations that allow you to host or create operating systems in the cloud, they will configure them. It will come up in a secure configuration with today's patches on it. However, you're responsible for creating the users on those. They will say, you can create admin users and you can create regular users, but it's up to you to do that appropriately, to do the least privilege. Look at network controls, host controls, physical controls, endpoint protection. All of these are areas that should be in the shared responsibilities matrix. In addition, the shared responsibilities matrix typically will have a bunch of text in there that says, and here's what you need to do. That's just another way of saying this is your responsibility. Pay huge attention to this. And I just kind of want to call out organizations who outsource anything. You should have two key things: a shared responsibilities matrix and a service level agreement. In both of those, it should state what the responsibilities of each party are. Make sure they align. They're the same. Secondly, have a program in which you hold them accountable. Like if they said, we will keep your systems patched, how do you know? Do they get vulnerability scans? Can you scan for them? Can you simply bring up what the current software version is on a new system and check it against what it should be? If it doesn't meet the SLA, you need to have a program to go after them and say, hey, this is our contract. You don't meet that contract. Now what do we do? Maybe they owe you some money. Maybe they will fix it. Maybe you can get out of the contract and go to someone who keeps it up. But it's really important that you don't just assume I have a contract. They said they would do something. You have to ensure they actually do that by performing some activities.
And I also say this to some of the MSPs that I work with, that you need to make sure that you spell out what you're not going to be responsible for should one of your companies have an incident. Because I think human nature from a non-technical person's point of view is, if something goes wrong, the first thing they want to do is they want to say, well, the MSP should have taken care of this, should have made sure that this didn't happen. So I think just as the other side of the coin too, make sure you take a look at your service level agreements, what you're making sure you spell out for your clients, that if you have, some kind of a cyber attack or incident, that, you're not just going to be there left holding the bag, you're responsible for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's key.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right. So here we go. What is a reasonable timeline for a company that wants to prepare for CMMC?
Yeah. And I'm going to have to divide the companies up. everyone believes that we're doing okay when it comes to cybersecurity. If that's a sentence that would cross your lips, then you're not doing okay. I'm going to call those, immature organizations. So most organizations are probably immature in terms of cybersecurity if they are asking these kinds of questions. If they're just coming up to speed on CMMC and NIST 171 or 800 171. And for those organizations, you're going to have to start moving some things. You're going to have to start creating processes and running your organization according to those processes. Now, does this sound like what your organization does now? If not, you've got some work to do. You will need to write high-level policies that echo the requirements in the CMMC. That are pushed down to processes on how those requirements are met. And you'll have to train people on those and actually perform it that way. It is no good to have a template policy that you don't follow. I am not a fan at all of policies in a box. You can go on the internet and download someone else's policy. Higher education institutes and state governments are pretty good at putting those online, and you can copy it and slap your name in it. Assessors will not be fooled. If it's just your name in there, but it's describing an environment and a practice that you don't perform, you're going to fail. So instead, maybe you can use those as good outlines, but it's best to work with a policy template outline and then go subject by subject on what makes sense in your organization and how are you going to implement it. For example, how fast are you going to patch systems? Within 3 days, within 3 hours, within 3 months. All of those things are selectable, and make sure you have the process to back it up. What's acceptable use on your system? Are people allowed to go to their own email on your system or their private email or not? Those are things that need to be in your acceptable use policy. So build the policies, build the procedures, and train people on it. I think we're talking about 12 to 18 months for an organization that doesn't currently have documented processes that they follow. In the rarer instance of a mature organization, you know what your SPRS score is. It's pretty high. Maybe you've just done a self-assessment, but you believe you're in place. I would say get an external review of the same thing, and you probably got some remediation to do afterwards. 3 to 6 months is probably what you need to get ahead of it prior to bringing in the assessment team.
I think that's a very good time frame. And I also like to remind people that, it's going to be an expensive process, but if you wait and then you have to try to cram this all into a much more compact time frame, it's going to be even more expensive, because at that point, you're going to, the gun's going to be to your head, whether you're going to be able to get the contract or not get the contract. So the more time you give, the more affordable it's going to be. You should take your time. But and another thing about those, policies in a box, it's very tempting, just to say, okay, well, we're just going to start with this. We're going to start with this. But you're absolutely right that nothing good is going to come of that, because you'll say, oh, are those forms done? Oh, yeah, they are done. Those policies are done. Yeah, they're done. But then they don't have anything to do with what's actually happening. And that's going to come out in the assessment. So don't waste your time with that.
That's right. Yeah. And Dana, that just kind of reminds me the way you get behind things is you assume you're a mature organization and your time frame is 3 to 6 months, and you pull the trigger on that. And then the first outside eyes that take a look at your evidence, now you're a year behind. So get ahead of it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And this is also just good business practices, right, for protecting your information and your company and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, all right, one more question we have. So where are some good sources that people can get some information about CMMC?
Yeah, I'll have to warn you, it is a difficult morass to wade through. I've been doing information security for 34 years, so the controls and the background information I was very familiar with. But when CMMC first came up, I was like, hey, what's this? And trying to figure out what is going on, especially with the drastic change from 1.0 to 2.0, it's a little bit of work. I researched it and wrote my own notes for about 4 months, just to kind of be able to explain it to customers. And that's what led me to writing a book about it. I ended up writing, I think it's the only book that talks about CMMC 2.0 anyway. And it's just there to help you prepare for an assessment and understand what CMMC is. The resources I went to get that information are the government resources. So you can start with NIST, download 800, 171, and 171A and read them and be familiar with them. You can go to the OSD Mill CMMC site. So that's acq.osd.mil/CMMC. That gives you the programmatic documents. And you can go to the cyberab.org site. They used to be called CMMC-AB, but now they're called CyberAB. I don't know why. I think they want to get into more things than just CMMC, but we'll see. Note that in the acquisition and the CyberAB, there are many areas of those websites where they have old acronyms and old definitions. So you kind of have to keep up to speed, but then start looking at the videos they prepare or the notes or read into the CAP or other things like that. You're diving in a bit. And that's kind of why I wrote the guide, to kind of help people diving into it.
Well, that was good that you did that, because you've been in this for a million years, and from an outsider looking in, it gets very complicated very, very quickly with the acronyms, and it's adds an overwhelming factor that you're like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, and one piece of advice I would give to, I think we're mostly talking here to organizations who want to prepare and get certified. Don't worry about the assessment process. There is a lot of confusion about the assessment process. What's an assessor called? What evidence will they look for? All of those kind of things. It kind of doesn't matter to those preparing for the CMMC certification. Understand the requirements. That's 171, and create your evidence. Now, does it really matter if an assessor needs to see 3 records from people being hired to ensure they had a background check, or 30? We're going to argue that in the assessor discussions. But as far as an organization, what do you care? Just keep records on that and provide as many as they need. So I think we can simplify things if we just get down to implement the controls.
Yes. Get started. Do something, right?
Get started and get someone else to review it.
Yes. So this was really, really helpful, Doug. I appreciate this. So do you have anything you want to throw out there and add for everybody before we go?
Yeah, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. Check out the book and give me any questions, because I'm learning this too, and I enjoy insightful questions like the ones you've asked, Dana, because that helps me be more sharp in explaining it. So I look forward to hearing from anyone on this subject.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you everybody for watching, and maybe you'll come back and do another video with me.
I'd love to. Thank you.
All right, great. All right. Well, thank you very much, and thank you everybody, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.